Hey there, viewers. Court isn't usually the place for outbursts, but Diddy's hearings have been anything but normal. From shouting matches to emotional breakdowns, his wildest moments were all caught on record, and some of them left the entire room stunned. Let's get into it. Chapter 1. The Bailiff's Notes. I've worked courtroom 8A for 19 years, long enough to know when something's off, even if no one wants to say it out loud. Long enough to keep a second notebook under my bench, the one I don't file, the one that doesn't go through the system. Some of us still believe in keeping the things that don't sit right on paper, even if nobody ever reads them. The morning they brought in inmate 37,452-54, Sean Combs, but they never say his name out loud in the courthouse. I sharpened my pencil 3 times before I even wrote the date. I don't usually do that. The graphite was breaking in ways that didn't make sense. Felt like it was warning me. He came in wearing the standard suit, flanked by 2 marshals, walking like he was sleepwalking. Not hunched, not proud, just gliding. First thing I noticed, he never looked at anyone. Not the judge, not the jury, not his own lawyer. Eyes straight ahead, then up, then to the right. I logged it right then. Avoids human eye contact, gazes upward. Sconces? Exit sign? Most defendants at least try to seem human. They nod, they fidget, they sweat. Not him. He sat down like the seat had been waiting for him his whole life. Put his hands on the table, palms down. Stared at the glass of water in front of him and didn't move for 10 minutes. Didn't sip. Didn't even blink. The room had that cold draft again. It happens sometimes in 8 old vents, old bones. But this time it felt more like a hush, like the walls were holding their breath. Even the gallery was quiet in a way I don't hear often anymore. They were watching, sure, but it was different. Less like curiosity, more like anticipation. Around mid-morning, I started hearing the murmurs. He wasn't speaking to anyone directly, just under his breath. I was close enough to catch pieces of it. "That's not my face," he whispered once, after the first witness walked in. She didn't even get to the oath, just froze in the middle of the floor, like something in her brain skipped. Her arms went rigid at her sides, and she said, clear as a bell, "He said he saw the rehearsal." Then she collapsed. There was no objection, no noise, not even from the judge. The courtroom doctor came, lifted her out in silence. I logged the time, 10:41 IMM. I underlined it twice. After that, Diddy didn't react. No concern, no confusion. He just turned his head slightly toward the gallery and stared. Straight at a man in the back row I hadn't seen come in. Young guy, long coat, sunglasses still on indoors, never took them off. And I swear, I know how this sounds, but I swear Diddy moved his fingers. Not a wave, not a twitch. A signal. Index and middle finger curled together, like pulling invisible thread. Subtle. Too subtle for anyone else, but not me. I've been trained to watch hands before mouths. The man in the coat stood up 2 minutes later and walked out. No one stopped him. I don't even know if he signed in. At 11:15, the sketch artist asked to be dismissed. She'd done high professional trials before, never seen her shaken. But that day she walked over to the judge's clerk during a sidebar and whispered something. Next thing I know, she's gone. Leaves her pad behind. I passed by it during recess, flipped open to the half-finished portrait of Combs. She hadn't drawn his eyes, just left them blank, 2 white ovals where pupils should have been. It made the whole face wrong, like it wasn't human. She'd shaded everything else in, but the eyes were just void. At lunch, the janitor came to sweep under the defense table. I was still in the room, cleaning up spilled coffee. He crouched down, froze, and motioned me over, said, "Look at this." Underneath the defense table, sketched into the metal support bar, was a small symbol, looked like a spiral, with lines extending outward like sun rays but interrupted, like the rays had been erased or snapped. I'd seen it once before, back when they cleaned out his SHU cell after the blackout week. They found one on his mirror back then, and one scratched behind the bed frame. The janitor didn't say anything else, just took a picture, erased it with solvent, and nodded at me like, "You didn't see anything?" But I did, and I wrote it down, because patterns matter in rooms like these. When the same symbol shows up in a cell and under a courtroom table, someone's trying to make sure it survives scrutiny. The second half of the day dragged, not because it was slow, but because the energy shifted. The temperature went up, like the ventilation system stopped working. People were fidgeting now. Jury members looked restless. The judge kept shifting in her seat like her robe didn't fit right. Then, out of nowhere, Combs turned and spoke, not to the judge, not to his lawyer, to the wall behind him. He said, "You put her in the tape, you knew she wouldn't forget." I looked around. No one moved. His lawyer pretended not to hear. The court reporter paused for half a beat, but then kept typing. "It's not in the transcript." I checked. I always check. I wrote it down. Same as I wrote down the way he smiled after, like he was remembering something private, like the memory wasn't his, but someone else's, and he was borrowing it for a second. At 3:12 p.m., he tapped his water glass. Once. Then again. Then again. 3 times. The pattern matched a knock I heard last week on the wall in his holding room. But that was a different story. Maybe. The last thing I saw that day, the thing I keep coming back to, was the way he looked up as court adjourned. Everyone stood. The judge banged her gavel, and Diddy looked right at the exit sign, bright red, humming slightly. He whispered something. I couldn't hear it, but his lips moved with purpose, like it wasn't words, more like a line from a script, something rehearsed. After he was let out, I stayed behind. Took my logbook from under the bench and finished my notes. Heading, I stopped mid-sentence. I don't usually do that, but something about the way the room felt, emptied but not empty, made my hand freeze. Looked down. My last entry read, "He doesn't want silence, he wants the performance forgotten." And then my pencil snapped. For the 4th time that day. I haven't sharpened it since. Chapter 2. The folder with no name. I've been in records for 5 years, and until last Thursday, nothing I'd handled ever gave me that feeling. The feeling you get when you know you've seen something you weren't meant to. I mean, sure, we get strange things down here. Judges' handwritten notes with coffee stains, hard drives with strange labeling conventions, even the occasional post-it from an intern trying to be cute, like the one that said, "Do not summon whatever is in here," on an old flash drive that turned out to be blank, or maybe not. But this one was different. The folder wasn't scheduled. It wasn't in the chain of custody log. It just appeared on my intake table that morning, sandwiched between a duplicate witness statement and a chainmail envelope marked "Return to Storage C, seal until verdict." No return code, no initials, just a plastic binder clip and a Sharpie written label that said /V Day 5, not for transcript. I stared at it longer than I should have. Something about the wording made me pause. We use not for transcript on rough cuts sometimes, or courtroom prep footage. Stuff that never leaves internal systems, but we always log them. Someone always signs them in. This one didn't even have a case number scrawled on the edge. Still, protocol's protocol. You don't question what you're asked to digitize and move. You do the job, you don't get involved. I opened it. Inside were 4 glossy, high-resolution stills. Courthouse surveillance camera style, fisheye lens, slightly desaturated tones. Clearly from one of the basement holding rooms. The angle showed a small steel table, 2 chairs, and nothing else. No timestamp, no watermark, just 4 images. In the first, a woman sat in the far chair, hands clasped together on her lap, head bowed, shoulders curled inward. You couldn't see her face, but you could see the tension in her posture, like her whole body was waiting for something she couldn't prepare for. In the second image, Diddy was in the room, sitting across from her, leaning forward, elbows on the table. His head was tilted slightly, not aggressive, but not neutral either, just familiar. That was the word that made my skin crawl. The way he looked at her wasn't casual or threatening. It was familiar, like they'd been in that room before, like he knew exactly what she'd say, even though she hadn't spoken yet. There was no audio. These were just stills, but someone, somehow, had added captions underneath the images. Thick black marker on the physical photo paper, written in uneven, anxious handwriting. Under frame 2, the caption read, "You think they'll believe you?" Frame 3 showed him a little closer, one hand now reaching across the table. Caption, "You think this is real?" In the last frame, he was looking directly into the camera. His eyes were locked with the lens, his mouth slightly open, just enough to show he was mid-word. The caption read, "We rehearsed this, remember?" I pushed the folder back, stood up and walked to the wall. I didn't want to be near it, not because I believed anything strange, but because every instinct in my body was telling me this wasn't for me. That someone had wanted it in the system, but not acknowledged. Planted, but not validated. Still, I'm not the kind of person who leaves things half-finished. I scanned each frame into the secure archive node, assigned a provisional case code, and filed it under the anonymous evidence header for temporary storage. But right before I closed the terminal, the metadata pinged something strange. Playback flag, loop initiated. I clicked again, double-checked. That tag only appears when a file has been flagged for automatic recursive playback, meaning the file isn't meant to just be stored. It's meant to play, over and over, silently, in the background of whatever system it's in. Like it's not evidence, but a script. And that wasn't the end of it. A few hours later, the woman from the footage appeared in the courtroom upstairs. I didn't see her go in. I didn't know her name. But I recognized the way her shoulders curled, the way her hand stayed perfectly still in her lap. She sat down in the witness chair and stared forward. She didn't say a word. The judge prompted her. Once, twice, a third time, no response. Her lawyer leaned in, whispered something, nothing. Finally, the judge called for a brief recess and summoned a court medical liaison. They checked her out right there on the stand. Eventually, a soft diagnosis was spoken, barely above a whisper. Psychogenic speech paralysis. She could speak, physically, but something had shut it off. Defense didn't object, not even a murmur. Prosecutors didn't push. Everyone just accepted it, like they expected it, like this was all part of some larger mechanism they didn't want to disrupt. After the adjournment, no one mentioned her again. No one mentioned the footage either. Later that evening, back in the records room, I went to clean up the metadata trail just to make sure the folder was properly registered now that it had been used. That's when my screen blinked red. A message scrolled across the top of the archive terminal. Duplicate submission detected. That shouldn't happen. I only filed it once. I checked the file tree. It had been logged under my user key twice. Same timestamp, same content hash. Identical down to the byte. I deleted one. The warning disappeared. But the anxiety didn't. I didn't sleep that night. I kept seeing that final frame in my head. Diddy's eyes locked with the lens, that slight part in his lips, like he was still speaking, still delivering his line, over and over, in whatever loop they'd programmed him into. Next morning, I went back in and tried to print a copy of that last image, not for the record, for myself, because I needed to prove to myself that what I saw was real. The print function failed. Internal archive files aren't allowed to be printed outside of admin approval. I know that, but I also know how to override it, and I did. It printed, finally, but the image came out inverted. All the blacks turned white. All the whites turned to shadow. His face was still there, but the eyes were fully black now. Not from shadow, from absence. I folded the paper into quarters and slipped it into my bag. I don't know why I kept it. Maybe because I knew no one else would. Maybe because I'm starting to think this trial isn't about evidence or verdicts. Maybe it's about something that already happened. Something we're just watching play out again. And maybe I'm just another Lou. Chapter 3. The Chair in Row 3. I don't know how long I'm supposed to keep pretending this is normal. I was selected for jury duty like anyone else. Called in, screened, assigned a badge, warned not to discuss anything, not to take notes. But I took notes anyway. Not the kind they meant, not bullet points on testimony or objections, just what I saw, what I heard, or what I thought I did. It started on day 2. That's when I noticed the chair. Row 3, 4th seat from the left, middle section of the gallery, just behind the defense. Standard issue courthouse seat, slightly scratched on the metal armrest. I don't know why I kept looking at it. Something about the way the light hit it, or maybe it was just the way people kept sitting there, who I swear hadn't come in. At first, it was a young woman in a brown blazer. She never looked up, just stared at the floor. I glanced at her a few times during a recess and then forgot about it. But on day 3, it was someone else. An older man, maybe in his 60s. Thin, wearing a hat he didn't take off. Sunglasses indoors. I remember that clearly because the bailiff motioned for him to remove them, and he didn't. The bailiff just backed off. Then day 4 came, and that's when I wrote my first real entry. Day 4, 9:58 a.m. The chair is empty, but I can hear breathing behind me. It's steady, familiar. I turn around. No one is sitting there, but the floor under the chair is scuffed like something had just moved. I swear I hear someone whisper, "Say your line." I didn't tell anyone. I'm not new to stress. I've had dreams that linger too long in the morning. I've seen shadows in corners after long nights, but this was different. This wasn't confusion. It was recognition. By day 5, I'd stopped looking at the trial the same way. The witnesses were saying words, but they sounded rehearsed. Not just well prepared, but timed, like someone was pressing a mental cue card in their heads. The voice of the man being tried, the one they call inmate 37-4-442-54, though we all know who it is, kept drifting into the gaps. He wouldn't speak often, but when he did, it was never in response to anything current. He spoke like he was on delay, or like he was answering something that hadn't been said yet. That was the day he turned his head, met my eyes, and mouthed the words, "You're not on the jury. You're the record." I didn't blink. I couldn't. My breath caught in my throat like a piece of dry cotton. I didn't tell anyone. How could I? There was nothing to say that wouldn't get me flagged for removal. But I started to believe him. Date 6/1:23 p.m. The chair is full again. A child this time. A girl in a school uniform. She's swinging her feet like she can't touch the floor. I blink, and she's gone. No one around me notices. The gallery is full, but no one ever reacts to who's sitting there. I started making excuses to look that way. Dropped a pen, stretched my neck. Once I pretended to sneeze just so I could turn and scan the 3rd row. Each time it changed. Always that same seat. Sometimes the person wasn't moving. Once, I swear I saw myself sitting there. Just for a split second, a blur in the reflection of the exit sign. My jacket, my glasses, my shoulders slouched the exact same way. But my body was still here, in the jury box, sitting like nothing happened. Day 7, 3:47 p.m. I hear my own voice, not in my head, from behind me, saying, "It's not your turn yet." I know how this sounds. I know what you're thinking. Delusion, stress, courtroom fatigue. But I've worked in high-pressure environments before. I've never lost my grip like this. I've never written down my own voice like it didn't belong to me. The thing is, no one else seems disturbed. Jurors are chatting on breaks like it's traffic court. The judge is patient but firm. The lawyers are doing their dance, but none of them seem to see it. The gaps, the loops, the way the lights flicker at the same moments each day. The way testimony sometimes overlaps, almost word for word, even from people who never met. And that chair. That damn chair. Day 8, 2:06 p.m. I try to focus on the witness, a woman describing an underground room. She says there were no windows, just mirrors. She says the mirrors showed her things that hadn't happened yet. I look toward the third row. The chair is empty again, but now there's a folded piece of paper on the seat. I blink, and it's gone. I requested to be excused today, told the judge I was experiencing what I described as stress-induced perceptual distortion. I didn't use the word psychosis. I knew better. I said I wasn't sleeping well, that the trial was causing me disorientation. The judge looked at me for a long time, then said, "Noted. Request denied." That was it. No questions, no follow-up, just a dismissal, like she already knew I'd try. "Do exercise more," he said. But I hear different music in the background. So here I am, back in the box, listening to a man on trial respond to things we haven't heard yet. Looking at a chair that keeps holding things I can't unsee. And writing this. Not because I want to remember, but because I think maybe that's the point. Maybe this isn't the first time we've done this. Maybe this whole trial is a rerun, a memory someone plugged back into the walls. And maybe I'm not a juror at all. Maybe I'm just the Playback, Rehearsal girl. I didn't know she was even on the list. No one in the jury room did. When the bailiff called for the next witness and the door opened, it was like the room held its breath. She walked in slowly, not timid, not bold, just calculated, like every step had been timed. The light caught the shimmer of her collarbone, but her face was turned down. It wasn't fear, it was something colder than that, something studied. The judge asked her to state her name for the record. He paused, then said, "I don't use it anymore." A long silence followed. Everyone expected pushback. Courtroom protocol doesn't leave space for anonymity. But the judge, who'd been strict, unyielding with others, nodded. "We'll proceed under pseudonym," she said. "Witness will be recorded as Rehearsal Girl." I remember a murmur rolling through the gallery, but no one spoke above a whisper. You could tell the lawyers already knew who she was. The defense didn't flinch. The prosecution just leaned back. She took the stand and adjusted the microphone. Her voice, when it came, was precise, like a news anchor. Not warm, not broken, just performed. I was recruited in 2014, told it was a scheduling assistant role. I was 21. She looked up at the jury then. Her eyes met mine. And I swear, this is going to sound insane. I felt like I'd seen her before, but not here, somewhere else. Somewhere without a room. I was told to memorize a list of phrases, key compliments, reactions. I was fitted for clothing that wasn't mine, hair extensions that matched someone else's, contacts to change my eye color. I asked what the job was really about. I was told it's for preference screenings. She explained how she was taken to various locations, mansions, hotel suites, recording studios converted into private lounges, and told to act out certain emotional beats. Her instructions would come through an earpiece or via pre-written scripts. Sometimes she would pretend to argue. Sometimes she'd be instructed to cry on cue. Other times she'd simulate submission. The goal wasn't pleasure, it was preparation. They filmed everything, she said flatly. Every gesture, every pause. They'd review it later. I was told it was to decide how best to stage the next event. Event? The prosecutor asked. Freak off, gift night, punishment screening. They had different terms, different rooms. He talked about the mirror room, a square chamber built entirely out of reflective glass. No windows, no doors visible from the inside. Just her, a microphone, and a laminated script placed on a stool. You were supposed to look at yourself while performing, she said, to see what they'd see, to adjust. There was a red button on the wall. She was told it was a safety mechanism, that if anything felt too intense, too overwhelming, she could press it and the session would stop. It didn't stop, she said. It made the music louder. It distorted the tempo. The lights changed color. If you pressed the button, it meant you weren't in character. That was the real test. Some people took notes while she spoke, but I didn't. I couldn't. I felt like moving my hand would break something invisible in the air, like we were listening to a tape that shouldn't be playing. She described being instructed to mimic other women. She'd be shown footage, raw clips, often without context. She was told to match the movement, the tone, sometimes even the breath patterns. They were cataloging reactions, testing responses, seeing what he preferred in advance. Who's he? The judge asked, though she didn't really need to. Rehearsal girl didn't answer. She just stared across the courtroom, right at Diddy. He didn't blink. He didn't fidget. He just sat there, jaw slack, like he was waiting for her to finish the scene. I didn't escape in the usual way, she said eventually. I didn't run. I didn't hide. I was released. That made everyone look up. They told me I'd completed my cycle, that I'd been evaluated, that I wasn't needed anymore. She paused again. Her lips trembled, but not from nerves. Right before they let me go, someone handed me a folder. It was gray, no markings except a small tag in the corner. What did it say? The prosecutor asked. Her voice dropped just slightly. Cycle 3, Legacy. That was when the room changed. Not physically, but emotionally. Like the courtroom dropped a few degrees. People shifted in their seats. A juror coughed twice, like something had caught in their throat, but wouldn't come loose. She said she never opened the folder, threw it into the Hudson 3 days later. But the phrase stuck. Cycle 3, Legacy. Do you believe you were part of something larger? The prosecutor asked. Don't believe, she said. I remember. Then came the cross-examination. The defense attorney, stoic, clinical, didn't question the abuse, didn't challenge the locations, didn't even dispute the timeline. He only asked one thing. How do you know this is the first time you've testified? She tilted her head at that. I don't. He leaned in. How do you know this isn't another performance? And then she said it, slowly, deliberately. This isn't a testimony. This is a dress rehearsal. He's not reacting because we've done this already. Betty still didn't move, still didn't blink. She stepped down from the stand without being dismissed. Walked right past the bench, the jury, the defense, and out the door. No one stopped her. No one could. Chapter 5. The Man with the Burned Wrist. I didn't expect anything out of the ordinary when they pulled me in that morning. Security footage review is usually the most boring job in the building. Hours of people walking through doorways, swiping badges, drinking bad coffee. Occasionally you catch someone sneaking into a courtroom to take selfies, or a junior clerk picking through the vending machine without paying. Nothing that matters. But that morning, it was flagged red. Reach notification from camera 8JC, hallway feed behind the judge's chambers. That corridor's restricted. No one gets in there unless they're cleared for direct access to the judge's chambers or the witness prep suites. The report said the breach wasn't during active hours. It was time-stamped from the night before 2:12 a.m. System flagged movement with no accompanying badge swipe. Infrared triggered. The door had been open for 11 seconds. Standard procedures to isolate the motion event and export a loop. I keyed it up, like I've done 100 times before. Expected to see a clerk who forgot to log out, or a misfire from a rolling cart. What I saw wasn't that. Man was sitting in the witness prep room, still. Silent, like he'd been there a while. He had no clearance, his name wasn't logged in the entry log, but he was just there, seated on the plain metal chair across from the prep table. Fluorescent lights made his skin look paler than it probably was. His face wasn't fully visible at first. But what caught me immediately was the bandage. His left wrist was wrapped in white gauze, sloppy, like it had been done in a rush. It covered most of his hand, fingers peeking out swollen and discolored. Even through the poor resolution of the hallway cam, I could tell the skin underneath wasn't healing right. Burned. I checked the room assignments. No witness was scheduled for that room at that hour. In fact, that room was marked inactive for the next 3 days, maintenance tag attached. So why was he there? Aided and calmed, I rolled the footage forward. He doesn't move for the first 5 minutes, just breathes, slow, deliberate, like he's waiting for someone to arrive. As he reaches into his coat and pulls out a Molotov cocktail, real simple, brown glass bottle, rag stuffed into the neck. He places it on the table like he's setting down a paperweight. Next, he reaches into his inner jacket pocket and pulls out a folded photograph. He places that beside the bottle. I leaned in close to the monitor. It was a car. A scorched-out frame, the kind you see in bomb aftermath photos. One of the doors was sheared open, and the passenger's side was completely melted through. The photo was grainy, printed from an old inkjet, but I could still see the background. A narrow driveway, a black gate, palm trees in the far distance. It wasn't the car that haunted me, though. It was the small, dark silhouette visible in the front seat. The man didn't say anything, not at first, but then, right before the footage ends, he turned and looked straight into the camera, right through the lens, like he knew where it was, like he'd been told to find it. His lips moved. I ran the audio file. That's when I noticed the problem. There wasn't supposed to be any audio, but this file had one. It wasn't normal court security mic input. It was compressed, grainy, like it had been pulled from an older source. But it was there, and it played just 4 seconds of dialogue. The man's voice low and steady. He was in the car. He called it a gift. Then silence. At 2:23 a.m., the lights flicker once in the hallway. When they come back on, the chair is empty. No one enters, no one leaves, no doors open, but the room is empty. I double-checked the system, searched for the backup footage. Nothing. The original video was gone. Erased from the directory, but not logged as deleted, just absent, as if it had never existed. No overwrite tag, no purge signature. But that wasn't the end of it. I kept digging, because once something disappears like that, it usually means it's been moved or hidden. That's when I found the secondary file, tucked into a folder labeled Playback Witness 5.1a, stored not under my technician profile, but under a system administrator login I didn't recognize. The access trail was encrypted. That's not standard. Courtroom footage isn't protected like that, unless someone doesn't want it circulating internally. I opened the file. It was the same footage, but different. The man is still there, sitting, wrist bandaged, bottle on the table, but there's something wrong with the loop. The moment where he turns to the camera, it doesn't happen once. It happens over and over. Each time his head resets, like it's been rewound. He turns, stares, his mouth moves, then his face jolts back to neutral. Then he turns again, and again. No pause, no end. Like he's been programmed to keep remembering, to keep repeating the moment where he almost said too much. I went back to the metadata. The file was created 4 days before the breach, 4 days before he ever entered the room. That shouldn't be possible. There was no way to track who input the file, no IP, no login tag, just a single string of characters embedded into the description field. Cycle-loaded, playback, persistent, archive compliant. I reported the anomaly to my supervisor. She told me to log it, encrypt the findings, and move on. But I didn't. I printed a still from the loop, the moment just before his lips move, when he looks the most human, the most haunted. I keep it in my drawer now, because I think he wasn't just sitting in that room for no reason. I think he came back because he remembered something they didn't want him to, something that didn't fit the script. And maybe, just maybe, he knew the playback would catch it. Even if the court would. Chapter 6. He didn't blink. I wasn't supposed to be doing this long term. The courtroom internship was a 10-week thing, mostly observational, mostly dull. You're told to log daily summaries, sit quietly in the gallery, and try not to look like you're learning more than you should. Honestly, I thought I'd spend most of the time watching boring motion hearings or someone mispronouncing objection. But that was before they assigned me to courtroom 8A, before inmate 37,452 through 54, before the moment I realized I had timed a man not blinking for 17 minutes. It started as a joke, just something to keep myself awake while I was supposed to be tracking notes from the victimology expert on the stand. The witness was going on about coercive consent patterns, how lights and repeated phrases and ambient music could wear down resistance, how certain rituals were designed to simulate free will but actually manufacture obedience. But while everyone else was watching the witness, I was watching Diddy. Because he hadn't moved. His body was still, his neck slightly tilted, eyes forward, no blinking, no reaction, not a twitch, like he was carved from something harder than flesh. At first, I thought I was exaggerating it in my head, so I checked my notes. The expert started speaking at 10:17 a.m. At 10:34, I looked again. Still no blink. I started to feel the back of my neck crawl. I've seen people stare before, dead stares, angry stares, but this was something else. Like he wasn't there, or like something else was inside, just holding the eyes open to keep the illusion going. At the end of testimony, I flagged the footage from the court monitor database and asked if I could review it for note clarification. No one stopped me. I fast-forward to the same timestamp, played it back at 1x speed, then 0.5x, then frame by frame. He didn't blink, not once. For 17 minutes and 23 seconds, his eyes stayed wide, wet, and vacant. The pupils didn't track motion, the irises didn't constrict when light passed. Nothing. I ran it by a fellow intern and asked if she'd noticed anything. She said, "Honestly, I try not to look at him. He makes the air feel heavy." Still, I needed confirmation. I flagged it in the logbook under Anomaly Observation Window and submitted it to the clerk. Later that day, during recess, I approached the same clerk to follow up. She didn't say anything, just handed me a folder from under her desk and walked away. No eye contact, no explanation. The folder was matte black, no standard labeling, just a sticker in the center with stamped letters. Subject 0 expression, compliance. I took it back to the intern desk and opened it beneath the divider so no one would see. Inside were sketches, dozens of them. Courtroom angles, witnesses, jury members, even a few from perspectives that couldn't possibly exist, like someone had drawn the courtroom from above or from inside the wall. And in all of them, Diddy was there, sitting in the defense chair. Same posture, same placement. But in none of them did he have a face. The head was always present, the silhouette, the posture, but the facial features were smudged, absent, or deliberately left blank. Sometimes it was a white void, other times thick lines of graphite scratched across the face like someone had tried to erase him and failed. One sketch showed the courtroom mid-recess, jurors turning in their seats, bailiff halfway through a motion. And in the back row, near the exit sign, someone was standing, holding a folder. I looked closer. They were wearing my jacket, my shoes, my shape. I closed the folder. Kept thinking maybe it was a coincidence. Maybe the sketch was meant to represent someone else. Maybe the artist drew from memory and just invented a shape. But the feeling didn't leave. It stayed with me when I left for the day, followed me down the hallway, lingered on my bus ride home. That night, I tried writing in my intern journal, the one we're required to submit at the end of the rotation. I got as far as the date and calmed and I wrote, "I think I'm in the sketch now." I sat with that sentence for a long time, then added, "I don't remember being drawn, but it looks like me, and I'm watching." And I was watching him watch nothing, watching myself start to disappear into the background of a room I was only meant to observe. The next day, I filed no summary, just a single entry card into the system with 3 words. Loop detected, playback. I didn't get a response. I'm not sure I was supposed to. Chapter 7. Final performance reviewed. I've worked forensic evaluation for 15 years. Most of my clients don't know why they're being observed. Some pretend not to. Others perform competence so aggressively that it becomes the clearest sign of fracture. I've seen the full range: dissociative identity, trauma-induced fugue, psychopathy with theatrical mimicry. But I've never sat across from someone like 37,452-54. He wasn't confused, he wasn't evasive, he wasn't violent, but he was something worse. He was prepared. Our sessions began quietly. My assignment was clear: court-ordered observation to determine state of mind during testimony, response to confrontation, and overall behavioral continuity. He wasn't on medication. He'd refused any legal diagnosis, but the judge required my silent presence for at least 3 non-consecutive appearances. I was allowed 2 formal interviews. The first one was in holding room 2C 45 minutes before testimony on day 10. He greeted me with a small nod and said, "You're the one from Act 2. I didn't correct him, I wrote it down. His posture was relaxed, legs crossed, hands on his knees like he was waiting for wardrobe. He asked me if I'd seen the stage notes. When I asked him to clarify, he just smiled and said, "You'll find the direction in the playback. They always do." I tried grounding the conversation. Started with basic orientation, time, place, name. He got the date wrong by 2 days, but not in a casual way. He said it with such certainty I second-guessed myself. When asked to identify the courtroom, he said, 8A, same layout as rehearsal. Tighter lighting though. I'm guessing they downgraded the gels? I didn't respond. When I asked if he understood the charges against him, he nodded. But when I asked if he remembered the victims by name, he went silent. Not resistant, just void. After several seconds, he looked at the wall behind me and whispered, "They're just the lines. The girls. The ones with the same faces." Then came the accents. His voice changed subtly, but distinctly, depending on who was speaking on the stand that day. When the musicologist testified about sonic conditioning, he adopted a soft, Midwestern lilt, syllables rounding off. When the forensic tech described mirror devices found in one of the event rooms, he shifted to clipped consonants, British inflection. I asked him directly if he was aware his speech patterns were changing. He said, "Of course, I'm method." Later, during open court, I watched his eyes, rapid movements during specific testimony, not tracking people but reacting to sound cues. At one point, when a witness described pressing a red button to stop a scenario, Diddy's pupils dilated and he mouthed something silently. I played back the footage later, froze it, lip read. He said, "Wrong cue." She jumped a line. I began to suspect something deeper than trauma or showmanship. Dissociation, yes, but layered, compartmentalized, not defensive, constructed. On the second interview day, I brought forms for his signature, basic consent acknowledgement and mental health evaluation checklist. He looked at the clipboard for a long time, then signed. But he signed it backwards. Not left hand, not mirrored on accident. Every letter of his name reversed, neatly, legibly. I asked him why. He said, "That's how the prompter shows it backstage. It only reads right when you're facing the audience." I pushed harder, tried to anchor him to something concrete. I asked him what he remembered about his last private residence, the last trip he took, the last woman who said no. He looked up, right into my eyes and said, "If I finish the performance, do I get to forget again?" That was the moment I crossed my own line. I began logging the sessions not only in the official court database, but in a secondary document I kept offline. It wasn't about paranoia. It was about preservation. Because what I was watching didn't feel like a descent into madness. It felt like a ritual being performed. Again. Like the courtroom was just another sound stage. And the trial? A production. I tried to speak to a senior clerk about the inconsistencies, about the reversals in his speech patterns, the predictive nature of his comments, the fact that he referenced incidents that hadn't yet been brought up, like the fire gift scenario, which only came into testimony 3 days later through a sealed witness. She cut me off. "Don't go down the performance rabbit hole," she said. "You won't get back out." I submitted my report. Detailed, footnoted, cautious, but firm in its psychological diagnosis. Constructive dissociative state rooted in long-term performative conditioning, possible layers of identity fragmentation, non-standard orientation to linear memory. I encrypted it, uploaded it through the evaluator's portal, and tagged it for internal review. The screen blinked red. Entry exists, submitted 2 weeks ago. But I had just written it. I double-checked the timestamp. It showed an upload date 14 days earlier. Same document hash, same title, same content structure. But I hadn't written it yet. The only difference was the final line. The version in the system ended with, "Evaded complete, cycle archived, subject 0, performance sustained." I never wrote that. I printed a hard copy of my version and folded it into an envelope. No name, no return address. I left it inside the locked drawer of my office, under the old DSM manual, beside the folder labeled Legacy Interview Redacted. And for the first time in my career, I closed a file not because I'd finished it, but because I wasn't sure who was reading it, or writing it. And Chapter 8, The Playback Loop. Weeks passed. The courtroom fell quiet in a way that didn't feel like closure. There was no press briefing, no posted verdict, no slamming gavel or closing remarks. Just silence, dry and surgical, like something had been cut out of public memory while the building remained standing. Courtroom 8A was locked. The judge, once lauded for her precision, was placed on indefinite administrative leave. Her office was cleared out in less than a day. Files were boxed with no visible labels. Her nameplate was gone before the weekend. The official explanation was stress, health leave. Unofficially, she stopped answering messages 2 days after the final hearing. The last record of her in the building is grainy surveillance footage of her stepping into the stairwell at 11:14 p.m., descending toward the sub-basement levels. No one saw her come back up. The jury? Silenced. Each juror signed a permanent non-disclosure agreement, unprecedented for this circuit. They were instructed not only to withhold information, but to forget it. The phrasing of the order was strange, almost theatrical. You are hereby relieved of the obligation to remember. One juror, a woman in her 40s with no prior mental health record, was institutionalized within the week. She claimed she couldn't stop hearing her own voice echoing through her apartment, not speaking, but reading, like she was narrating something that had already happened, like she was trapped inside a transcript she didn't write. She scratched a phrase into her bedside wall before being sedated. Playback never ends. Maintenance crews were assigned to courtroom 8A for renovations. The official record cited structural fatigue and ventilation inconsistencies, but that was just code for something else. The truth is, no one wanted to work in that room anymore. The air was wrong. The acoustics whispered back. The lights flickered with no electrical justification. And then there was the audio system. After hours, multiple security guards reported hearing testimony loops through the central PA, despite the entire sound system being physically disconnected 2 days after the judge left. One night, a young guard left a voice memo at 3:13 a.m., shaking audibly. There's no power. I checked the panel twice, but I can hear her, the rehearsal girl. Same voice, same words. Every time I pass the door, it's like she's trapped in the loop, and he's just watching her do it again. It was called in. They rerouted every speaker line, pulled out the amplifier racks, replaced the fuse board. The voices kept coming. A week later, a new intake employee was assigned to organize unused media files from prior sealed hearings, just a backlogged cleanup task. He was fresh out of college, didn't know the weight of the case, didn't even recognize the name 37,452-54. He was sent to Terminal B12, a secured access point, deep in the basement levels, used primarily for cold storage indexing. He sat down. Booted the system. The screen blinked twice. Then the terminal lit up. Composite videos cycle complete playback initiated. The file began playing automatically. No prompt, no confirmation request. Just a single composite clip. The footage opened with Diddy in holding room 3A, nodding slowly to someone off screen. Cut to him seated silently as the rehearsal girl pressed the red button on the wall. Cut to the man with a burned wrist placing the bottle on the table. Cut to the juror sketching in the margins of her notebook, eyes flicking toward the third-row seat behind her. Clip after clip, all drawn from the folders marked not for transcript. Each one stitched seamlessly together, spliced by someone or something that understood the internal rhythm of the trial in a way no human editor could. Diddy was in every scene, no matter the date, no matter the room. Same face, same posture, expressionless. But it wasn't passive, it was deliberate, a stillness that echoed, that multiplied. Like he wasn't reacting to what he saw, because he had already seen it. Like his presence wasn't evidence but instruction. The new employee leaned back, breathing hard, hand shaking as he reached for the terminal log override. But the keyboard blinked. A single command input flashed across the screen. Now it's your scene. The playback loop ended, the terminal powered down on its own. No sound remained, just the fan in the ceiling. That was when the employee noticed the sketchbook on the floor, half tucked beneath the server cabinet. It hadn't been there before. He picked it up. Inside were courtroom illustrations, dozens of them, pages curling with age, no artist signature. But they were detailed, meticulous. He flipped to the final page. A full sketch of courtroom 8A, jury box, defense table, witness stand, gallery. All the seats were filled. In the center of the page, drawn in darker lines than the rest, was a new figure, standing, unlabeled. The figure was facing the viewer, one hand holding a folder. Below the sketch, in looping script, "You were never watching a trial, you were watching the performance, and now it's your scene." The lights in the terminal room dimmed. No one ever saw the employee leave. The system marked his access card as active for another 5 hours. But no one was there when the morning crew arrived. Just the sketchbook, open to that last page, waiting.